August 1945 would spell the end of around 150,000 to 246,000 Japanese lives when 2 atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, making Japan the only country to ever face atomic devastation. Its unfettered power would seep its way into many facets of Japanese society and traumatize generations of people for years to come. The atomic bombs also had a relentless grip over Japanese creatives, all seeking to provide some type of commentary on the colossal grief that they shared. Akira is one of those pieces of entertainment that's not really too subtle about its historic influences, with its opening being a giant explosion and whatnot. Despite that, a lot of people don't really get what Akira is trying to say and distill it down to its amazing animation, tense action scenes, and the bike sliding, which has totally not been homaged to death.
I don't want to see another goddamn homage in anybody's movie.
Some people can probably pick up on the surface level stuff like the authoritarian government and the ramifications of unchecked capitalism that are tropes that come with the cyberpunk genre, but there's a lot of stuff that tends to go under the radar that has some striking parallels with the real world events. Let's start where it all began, with the Esper children and the experiments that were conducted on them. In Akira, the Espers are a group of test subjects that are completely stripped of their humanity, which is made evident by their designated numbers. This draws real-world parallels to the covert biological and chemical research unit called Unit 731. The Imperial Japanese Army took prisoners of war and civilians to test horrific experiments on, and worst of all, they simply refer to these subjects as logs. The experiments included subjecting their logs to pathogens to later use in bombings for biological warfare. Many of the staff involved in these experiments were granted immunity, which led to the government trying to cover up the entire unit. This sounds eerily similar in Akira because they also try to pathetically cover up their failed experiments under the Tokyo Olympic Stadium that later goes on to screw them over. Much like the real world, the government's inability to admit their wrongdoings is what leads to events that you see like in Akira. Most importantly, this demonstrates what Akira is most critical of, which is the unchecked scientific hubris combined with militaristic fanaticism. It is extremely easy to become corrupted by power, and multiple characters in Akira reflect that, such as Tetsuo himself. Tetsuo grew up in a rough environment where he was abandoned and picked on by a lot of his classmates, and this ends up being part of his downfall as it makes him harbor a deep-seated insecurity. Unfortunately, a lot of people in power can also be very insecure and emotionally unbalanced people, which usually leads to horrific consequences that Tetsuo symbolizes. Also, characters like Nezu, who start out with good intentions, end up falling prey to their lust for power just as easily. Another piece of symbolism in Akira is the Tokyo Stadium, which holds a lot of cultural significance to the people in Japan. In 1964, the Yoyogi Stadium would come to symbolize the post-war resurrection of Japan, but in Akira, the stadium seems to be crumbling and faulty, as if the illusion of progress and peace is finally starting to die off. A seemingly beautiful and meaningful piece of architecture is now nothing more than a distraction for the political fallout occurring. Katsuhiro Otomo would also pull from his own experiences during the Ampo protest, which was directly influenced by the atomic bombs. As part of Japan's condition to end the US military occupation in Japan, they had to sign a security treaty with the US, but this would allow the US to have extensive military bases set up in Japan and potentially meant nukes as well. This was seen as a massive imperialist decision and sparked public demonstrations that even led to the death of a student. It's thanks to that real-life experience that Katsuhiro Otomo had, he was able to perfectly demonstrate how easily and quickly power can fall. In the rise of decaying power came a new disenfranchised youth called the Bosuzoku in post-war Japan. They were a biker gang that sought to break free from society's strict norms, and they just so happened to be the basis for the triumphant heroes in the film. It's through these rebellious groups of people that would cause Neo-Tokyo to be challenged, brought to his knees, and be reborn. They are a wake-up call for Neo-Tokyo, as it's destroyed once again, It ends up looking eerily similar to how Japan looked before the bombings from a political standpoint. They donned the name the Great Tokyo Empire and are ruled by an authoritarian militaristic force. The people saying bonsai is also a not-so-subtle reference to the Japanese war cry in World War II. Now, this leads us into one of the most overlooked factors in Akira, which is its adherence to some aspects of Buddhism. Most of you are probably familiar with the soundtrack of the movie done by Tsutomu Ohashi, where he specifically uses mantras, especially when Tetsuo starts to turn. Many of these mantras are used to achieve alignment with the divine, which implies that these great moments of strife are possibly a necessary part of the cycle of life. Buddhist philosophy often preaches of samsara, or the Buddhist wheel of suffering, and Neo Tokyo reflects that cyclical nature. Lady Miyako in the manga has a much bigger role and delivers one of her most iconic speeches about the Great Stream. In her view, this stream would be the continuous loop of destruction and creation. The downfall of Neo Tokyo would be its utter consumption to earthly attachments, and it ends up going through a very ugly stage of rebirth, where it's transformed into something tribal, nationalistic, and violent before starting over again. More ignorant viewers might see the destruction as nihilistic, but it's one predicated on a necessary reset. This is a pretty uncomfortable topic that many stories tend to avoid, but the idea of destruction being something that is an inherent stage in society, I think kinds of holds up in some cases. A lot of civilizations in the past become just as screwed up, and sadly the only real way to incite change is to pull the plug. That doesn't seem like a lesson that most countries learn from. Populations grow apathetic and complacent with their societies, and only seem to lash out when it's too late. Tetsuo's transformation into a formless creator after his mutation could be seen as reaching a plane of enlightenment. It's actually thanks to Tetsuo's failure to move past his trauma and ego that causes the world to be born once again. In the film, Kei mentions how the amoeba can't comprehend the human mind, which should suggest that there's an ever-evolving consciousness, which fits in line with the Mahayana, where the practitioners strive for enlightenment for others to move past their own consciousness. In a way, the Esper children are also helping Neo Tokyo by following the Bodhisattva path and helping others try to achieve their enlightenment. Akira has a lot more going on under its hood than people realize. It's essentially a philosophical metaphor for the trauma of World War II and the harsh period of rebirth it suffered through. Its writing isn't necessarily what it's known for, or, in my opinion, not necessarily its strong suit, but it's really full of deep and meaningful insight into political turmoil and potentially grim insights into our own future, which is pretty sad considering it basically has been flanderized over the years, as its influence seemed to lay pretty heavily in its aesthetics only. You rarely see people bring up its commentary on politics or spiritual influences. It's clear that Katsuhiro Otomo put a good amount of thought into its themes, and I hope to see other people catch on to that in the future. If you have any other insights or your own analysis of Akira, feel free to drop a comment down below, and thanks for watching.